What's good, people? My name's Suli and welcome to this video that will hopefully help you become a better public speaker. So I've been public speaking for years, whether it's gone from small stages to large arenas to TED stages or even government stages. It's something that's formed an integral part of who I am, my brand, and also my ability to communicate my message. I've noticed over the years that a lot of people struggle with public speaking, and public speaking is important not just in what I do but in your professional capacity. You may have to public speak to your colleagues, you may need to present something, you may be an entrepreneur, you may need to present a deck to a group of investors, or you may just be someone who wants people to understand the ideas clearly, concisely, but also authentically. And I think that's what's so important about having the ability to public speak and learning and honing those skills. I mean, for generations, the human race has evolved based on communication. We can look at Steve Jobs' iconic iPhone speech, Apple speech. We can look at I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King. Or we can look at something as simple as Beyonce's Coachella performance, when she puts on a deep voice. But all of these people, they obviously have very highly trained experts behind them. Barack Obama is a great reference for someone who's really trained in the art of public speaking. But I noticed that there's certain skills that I have learned over the years that I see in these people that could be implemented by anybody in any capacity, especially when it comes to public speaking. So I just wanted to share that with you. And with that, I want to give you 10 steps to become a better public speaker. Step number 1. Get comfortable on stage. So early on in my speaking and performing career, one of the things I noticed is that there was always variables. The location will change, the people you're performing in front of will change, the audience size will change, the music will change, the mic will change. So what I realized very early on, that I needed to find a way to become comfortable on stage, and something that I could do consistently to allow me to situate myself in a state of comfortability on the stage. So for me, this came when I was watching a video about an actor, and they said whenever they went into an audition, they would untie, then tie their shoelaces again. Just because the act of tying your shoelaces is something so simple, and when you do it consciously, it puts you in a frame of mind that, okay, I'm just in a comfortable, familiar setting. So if you watch a lot of my earlier videos, one of the first things I'll do when I stepped up to the microphone is I'd untie my shoelaces and then I'd tie them again. And I'd make sure I take my time to tie them. And it wasn't a rush, it wasn't thinking the audience here, it was literally, I just need to tie my shoelaces. And in doing that, I was able to always step in stage and put myself in a place of comfortable understanding and preparation to deliver whatever I have to say. In terms of getting comfortable, another thing you can do, which I do a lot, is pacing. You can walk up and down the stage. I tend to just go for a leisurely stroll back and forth, up and down the stage, not in a particular direction, but something that just makes me feel like I'm in the area where I feel warm, I feel like casual, and this is my stage, I own it. The best way to feel like you own the stage is walking around it, taking steps around it, and not being restricted to just one tiny spot. Some people talk and they're just stuck in that spot, and automatically that makes you feel tense. It makes it harder to communicate the message, and a lot of people have that problem too. I studied a lot of comedians, and you'll find that a lot of them have certain habits with the microphone or with a stool, and these are all things that allow them to situate themselves in a state of comfortability. When you're more comfortable, you're always going to deliver your message and communicate in a more natural and authentic way to the people that are listening. And authenticity comes down to so many minute issues that people often not overlook, but become so overwhelmed and dismiss on stage. So one of the things I've noticed a lot of people try and do when they go on stage is try to put on a voice or an accent or something that appeals to the mass audience. But when you automatically step on stage and you're doing something that's inauthentic to you, it becomes significantly harder to communicate an authentic message. So whatever you need to do to get comfortable, maybe that's rolling your tongue, I don't know, it's clicking your teeth, it's running your hand through your hair, or it's just taking off your jacket. Do that, and hopefully that situates you for the first step of your presentation, performance, speech, or whatever you want to deliver. Step 2. Find something to do with your hands. A lot of people get on stage and, sometimes they hold paper, you can see their hands shaking, or their hands will be communicating messages that are not consistent to what they want to say or how they want to express themselves. For me, I've always find that it helps me to play with the microphone stand. So you may see me, I learned this from a friend of mine who's a comedian, you may see me leaning on the microphone stand when I step on the stage. You may see me talking and holding it. And even in situations where I don't have a microphone, I'm always trying to make sure that my hands are in positions of like expressiveness and outwardness. The worst thing to do is like not have an idea of what you're doing with your hands, even if it is just to put them in your pocket. If you want to put one hand in your pocket and use your other hand to communicate the messages, this is a really good way to not let your actions betray your intentions, because nervousness often communicates itself in many parts of our body that we're unaware of. I remember when I was having a conversation with a therapist, and I was describing like I was feeling tension. I was communicating to parts of my body that you generally feel tension in, and it wasn't until afterwards where she was like, you was touching these parts while you were talking. So yeah, be very cautious and mindful of what you want to do with your hands. Obviously, you don't have to keep them in one position throughout the whole thing, but initially starting off like that will really help you deliver long term as the conversation goes on or as the public speech is communicated. Step number 3. This is a very important point, and this is really about how you structure your conversation. And I will have a course on how to structure a public speech, and hopefully it helps. But here's just a tip that maybe some of you guys can learn from, and that's always, if you can, share a story that you're familiar with. The benefit of sharing a story you're familiar with means that even if you forget certain elements of what you want to communicate, you're always going to remember the story because it's personal to you, it's something you're familiar with, and it's something you have a natural relationship with. So when you're communicating the story, and I guess this is why I've seen a lot of people pitch their businesses, and we know the traditional, I was 13 when my parents did this. A lot of TED Talks starts like that. Or I was walking through Moscow and I noticed that, because even if you don't remember line for line verbatim what you wanted to say, you always know that story, and you know what parts people connect with, and you know what the parts the audience are going to engage with. So it's so important to have a story that at the top of your mind, with no reference points, no bullet points, no reminders, you know it really well, because then you can naturally begin or continue or end a public speech in a way that the audience is already going to relate to and is already authentic to you. So that brings me to my 4th step about structuring a public speech. Have reference points in your head. Whenever I go to have a speech, I always have, I'm fortunate, I've been doing it for a while, so I don't need word for word, but I have references, certain phrases or certain words that I know when I hit, it's time to move on to the next one, or I know where I'm at in my speech. So it's very important to have, when I first started, I used to do this with quotes. So I used to reinterpret or recommunicate a lot of popular quotes. And I always knew, especially when you're writing like spoken word like I do, I knew that, okay, when I hit this quote, the next quote is later down the line after I've explained this. So have referential bullet points in your head. So when you are talking, you're kind of keeping a mental map of where you were going in the speech. I'm even doing it now. I have the bullet points now as we're talking, but it's going to help you not necessarily not waffle, but also people feel confident in what you're saying. It's going to make people feel like this person understands what they're saying and I can follow them. A lot of public speaking is about trust. When you see someone who's comfortable, when you see someone who's articulate, when you see someone who knows what they're talking about, you trust them and you trust the time that you're investing in them, and you're able to stay along and carry along with their story. So that's such an important point. And like I said, that will all be in a course on how to structure your public speech, and that's a different kind of entity and beast in itself. Point number 5. So I've noticed it helps to have a rhythm when you are public speaking. Now, when I say have a rhythm, I don't mean like a metronome rhythm, but I feel like you should know the cadence at which you want to speak. Because when we get on stage, or when we get in front of a camera, or when we get in front of an audience, we get into this tendency of wanting to say everything that needs to be said as fast as possible and out of the way. But in a public speaking capacity, it is really, really important to have a rhythm. So I'm talking in this video right now because I feel quite comfortable, and video is a different medium. But if I was on stage, as I usually am, you would notice that my pacing would change depending on what I was saying. You would notice that, and that's because I would have structured it in my head, and you'd notice that also the cadence in which I'm saying stuff, and I'd go faster, slower based on where I'm at in the story. The rhythm is like listening to music. It helps you keep that pace, not just of the audience, but also of your speech and where you're going with it. So point number 6, there is no such thing as a mistake. I say that when a lot of people start public speaking, they get halfway through and then they forget something, and then they start stumbling and stuttering, and then they start saying, oh, this is not, and they communicate to the audience that they're not confident in what they're saying. And then you often lose the audience like that. I mean, unless you're young and, the audience have a context that they understand you outside of that speech. But there's no such thing as a mistake, because you know why? People don't know what you are going to say next until you tell them. So people don't know that you've made a mistake until you communicate it to them. So always come on stage, or always speak with the confidence that this is not a mistake, this is just a deviation, and I can get back on track. But the moment you let the audience know that you feel like you've made a mistake, or you apologize for something that you said, if it's not in jest and if it's genuine and you have to recompose yourself, then it kind of affects your speech, it affects the delivery, and it affects how people appreciate the message. So always remember, I'm not making mistakes. This is my story, this is my stage, I own it. So whatever I say goes. Then when I need to finesse around that, I will make that happen. Point number 7, never look directly at the crowd. Let me break that down. So you often find that when you're speaking to multiple people, I've spoken arenas. Arenas are like amazing. You've got thousands of people in the audience, but you can't see anyone. But when you're speaking to a small crowd, you can see every single person, and then automatically things become a lot more intimidating. So I'm not saying never look in the crowd. I'm saying don't make finding someone in the crowd your priority. Now I'm at a point where I can look at different faces and pick them out, but I never just focus on the sole face, because their reaction is going to dictate how you feel about your speech. It's a good tip to look just above the crowd, just above the heads, and look at a space directly there, and let that communicate your message. You'll get to a point where you can find individual faces, but never focus on one person. Don't let that one crowd member dictate to you how the speech is going. But so whenever I'm on stage and I'm talking, I'm always talking into the atmosphere. My message is going out to the world. There may be an audience here, but I'm not looking at them. This is a message that I'm delivering to the universe. So I'm saying it out here. Everyone is hearing it. And when it's done, the people in the crowd may be the ones that appreciate it. But definitely don't get caught up in looking right in front of you and letting that distract you from the speech. Point number 8, warm up your voice. This is something I should have done before I made this video. There's many warm-up techniques you can find online. I can also make a video about that, but warm up your voice, certain things like lip trills, diaphragmatic exercises. These are things that help you communicate a lot more clearer and also protect your voice. I did a theatre once, and we'd go through like an hour of warm-ups. It would be ba, cut. But it helps with the projection, clarity, and strength of your voice, which is obviously important when this is the most important tool you'll be using in public speaking. Point number 9, connect with the audience. I've seen people speak and the audience will laugh at a joke and the person will just carry on speaking over the audience's laughter. You are communicating a message to people. And if people are giving you feedback to that message, you should appreciate it. You don't necessarily need visual cues, but you most definitely need sensory ones, You need ones that are like, oh, they're laughing at this. Someone chuckled, or someone, oh, or somebody cried. You react to those things because then it makes it feel like you are having a conversation with the people that are appreciating your message. If you're just there to talk at people, talk at the group of people, it does not feel like a conversation, and coming to being comfortable, every public speech should feel like a conversation. So on to the last point. The last point is a fairly obvious one. Practice. Practice. I remember being in school once and they said practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes permanent. And you want this stuff ingrained in your head. You want it to come across second nature. You want it to be comfortable, and you want it to be clear, and you want it to communicate who you are. So you can only do that through repeated practice. Practice. Talking about practice, I'm talking about practice. Please let me know if that video was useful. I will do an extensive, in-depth course in relation to, how to be a better public speaker. But hopefully this video helps people, and it's an introduction to the information that will be communicated at a wider level. Please, if you stayed this long, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys very much for your time. Bless.